All right.
That's the signal. You need to talk.
Hey, whoa, I'm talking right now.
Okay.
Well, welcome, everybody, to this panel. We're talking about video games, as usual. Specifically, if you're going to speedrun a video game and it hasn't been speedrun before, what do? It's hard sometimes, but sometimes it's more fun, or different fun. We're going to talk about it. And so let's introduce ourselves then, huh? Eh?
Yeah.
Oh, I have to start alphabetically. I see. Okay, so I'm Author Blues. That's with a lowercase a. And I have speedrun a lot of games.
Good job. That was.
No, that's. What do you need to know? What, like 175 games at this point?
Wow.
I've done them all, except for the Zeldas. So.
That's pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, I'm Brosentia. I usually just play bad video games, or at least obscure video games. And that's what I love.
Yeah, I'm Linkums, and I do something sort of similar to that. Bad, obscure, weird games. So, yeah, here's just some examples specifically of games that we sort of pioneered without having too much behind them in the first place. This is a mix of everything that we've done. Just each of us doing things here.
Say, I'm about ready to like cry just seeing some of these because they're scary. Like looking back.
Yeah, we specifically picked ones that that we were at least probably the only or the primary RTA run of, but this cross section is not a good look for us.
Yeah. Well, some of these are actually good.
Which one?
Yeah.
Epic Dumpster Bear is pretty good.
I was gonna say Xena.
Oh.
Yeah.
Art style Orbiant. Did anybody play?
So what made you pick Epic Dumpster Bear?
Somebody gave it to me for free, the developer, and I played it, and it was like actual platformer.
That's not a gift. That's an inflict.
Okay, it was a legit platformer. It was a platformer, and it felt fast, and I knew nobody else was gonna play it because at the time it was a Wii U exclusive. So, and it was eShop only, and it looked like just some crap meme game. So.
Which it is.
It is.
Well, yeah, but it's kind of fun.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Made entirely of bought Unity assets.
Yeah. So that's just an example of like, that's why I picked that one, because it was actually fun. Nobody was going to play this thing, but it was good enough to see run, and I wanted to see a run of it, and there wasn't one, so I figured I'd do it myself.
Sure.
And I don't know, what about you guys with Xena and stuff?
No, you gotta hit Xena on this.
Xena, yeah, what the heck?
Well, Xena's good. Like, I don't know. It's got so many polygons. Honestly, no. We went down to Fun Unlimited in Logan, Utah, and they had a copy, I think, for 50 cents. And, Justin picked it out and said, hey, what about this game? So we bought it. I went home and tried it. It was love at first sight. It's the thing is with Xena, it's definitely a bad game, but every level has its own unique charm, its own unique objectives, and it just feels fresh for every level that you get to. So that's sort of why I grabbed onto it, because every level was different. You weren't just doing the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah, I was telling him too that after watching his run of Xena, every time I see it at the store now, I almost buy it. So
you're dangerously close these days.
Yeah, it's close. I think about it.
What's the price?
I don't know.
Like,
I don't actually check that far.
I've got money. I can give you like 50 cents. You know?
Right. Maybe next time.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'll take the wheel on this one. I picked up Darkened Sky because it's the Skittles game.
Oh yeah. So weird.
Yeah, it was a Skittles license, and it's awful, but a really good speed game, which is my answer for pretty much any game you ask me about. Awful, but a really good speed game.
It's amazingly gothic for a Skittles game.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they were going for on that one, but it has a interesting backstory that's way outside the scope of this conversation. But they liked what they made so much they asked politely if they could no longer have to make it a Skittles game, and they were told, "Nope, it's Skittles."
That your comment there though about it's bad, it's awful, but it's a good speed game. That is something that. A lot of this does end up with the awful game stuff, but
yeah,
that can make awful games actually fun, as you may have experienced yourselves. Maybe not, but even the game, if it's a bad game from objective, like just playing casually, speedrunning it can just turn in a new perspective and change the objective of playing it, which makes it a lot more fun sometimes.
For sure.
Yeah. So... Oh, King of Kings also. And Little Big Planet was actually a good one.
Yeah, Little Big Planet.
How about
that was like my second or third speed run. because my first one was Mirror's Edge, which people had done, but Little Big Planet, nobody had really done before. And I don't know, it had its charm. Again, every level felt different, and it was just exciting to go and find things that made it faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what speedrunning is all about.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of what is speedrunning all about anyway, why would we go for these kind of games that haven't been done before? What are some of the motivations that you would have for running a game that hasn't been done before, as opposed to picking up Mario 64, which has been done a million times? Like, I know Author Blues.
I'm way too insecure to compete on
Pretty
on a level playing field.
Yeah, well, you were the one that first discovered the hidden gem of Mario World, right? Nobody had done that before
Yeah,
you.
it was actually really interesting that no one had managed to touch it for like 20 years.
Yeah, no, that might not be true, but it might be. I'm not really familiar.
No.
I'm not telling you.
Okay. So yeah, what are some of the motivations that we would have that unique to this? Because it is a different thing. Because some people are going for world records. Some people are going just to have fun, to be good at a game, to feel fast.
You've opened my eyes. Why would I run a game that that no one's ever done before?
Why would we do
that's
this?
dumb.
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is kind of interesting to break new ground. I think that's the big thing, and there's going to be a lot of running themes throughout this conversation. But I think one of the biggest things is it can be a lot of fun to break new ground. There's a joy that comes from learning something that's already been discovered, something like a game like Super Mario World or Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, the games that end up being really prominent games in speedrunning where everyone's already, had their hands in that pot and everyone's already sort of come up with some ideas and figuring out how to take all of those ideas that have now been boiled down and condensed into one thing. That can be really rewarding, but I think just as much is taking something that no one has touched before, taking a game that is completely uncharted territory and trying to figure out the intricacy of it. And I think that's a really fun thing.
Actually, yeah, I think that there are a lot of hidden gems, a lot of lost games that honestly aren't in the popular sphere right now, that may disappear into obscurity in the next 10, 20 years, become completely unknown. I'm just thinking, the game that I'm running at GDQ, Monkey King, is one of those bootlegs that was made at a time that essentially people weren't allowed to play video games in China. They weren't allowed to make them. But these people came together and made this super bootleggy game that has its own charm. And it's just been a chance for me to learn a little bit more of its story and a little bit more exploring the strange, janky physics of that platformer. So it gave me more life for that game. It gave me more of an ability to celebrate something that nobody else celebrates.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's also always necessary to pick a game that has been done to death before. I think a lot of people pick games either based on some fun that they've had with exploring something new, or maybe a game from their childhood that, just because no one's speedrun it doesn't mean that it's not still a great game. And so you just dive in on it.
Yeah.
How about you, Linkums?
Yeah, definitely some of what Brosench was saying too, with finding hidden gems and showing them to the world. That was kind of my motivation for streaming and playing games before even doing speedrunning. Was I just like finding weird things or obscure things or hilariously bad things and just showing them to people. But with speedrunning too, part of it is almost like the satisfaction you have of playing Super Metroid for the first time and filling in the map squares. Is like watching speedruns that haven't been done, having these games just fill up with speedruns that have never been there before. It's like adding a Wikipedia page or like adding something to an encyclopedia, or just like you're contributing something that's now there that wasn't there before. Whereas with other games, it would be fun to run it, but I don't feel like I'm contributing as much. I would run it for fun, which totally valid reason. But for me, I feel a lot more motivated when I feel like I'm contributing something.
Actually, yeah, one thing that's really cool is that usually after we do a run, it's not going to be the best run in the world. But then, even if we leave it behind, almost always some person out there comes and destroys it, and completely gets a much better run. And it's something that's exciting, that if you first shine a light on a game, somebody else, because there's a record, because there's a time, because there's a video, they might come along and see, hey, this is something that I enjoy, something that I would love to possibly try to beat you. And also, oftentimes they'll see, wow, your time sucks. I'm going to destroy it. And it's exciting.
I think you touched on something really interesting, Linkums, that when you play a game like one of the popular games in the speedrunning zeitgeist, something like Super Mario World, you almost feel like you're just, placing your feet where the footsteps already are. But when you chart this, territory, you're actually in the process of content creation. It's that feeling of creating something new where there wasn't something before. If I go and get a personal best in Super Mario World, there's nothing really new there. There's no new ideas that I'm bringing to the table. I'm just walking in those footsteps. So it can be nice to actually feel like you're contributing something to the giant, ethereal knowledge base.
Right. And since it is in our title, the header description thing of this panel about easy world records, do you encounter that much as a thing? People going for undone game or games that haven't been touched just to claim the record and put it on the leaderboard and be like, aha, I have the record in, Flash Game 3.7. I know that's what you guys do, right?
There's a lot of people out there who, I would say, do that. I think it can be rewarding to feel like you're the best at something even when you're competing alone. But I think for the most part, I think the way that manifests itself more is other people looking in and saying, you must have done that for an easy world record. I mean, even for games that have competition, I don't care about those world records. Why would I care about the ones where I'm sitting there by myself? Usually I'm more interested in the quality of the run rather than, where I end up on the leaderboard, even though you're first place if you're the only one there, right? So
yeah, it's going to obviously vary by person.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking of Back to the Future, which is a game that sort of resurfaced, and there had been old runs, but then this whole community just started where we all jump back into it. We know nobody's going to beat you, NPC. Okay, Nest Cardinality, but nobody else will beat you because you've got a really good time, Mr. Number 2. But it's fine. It's not about really beating each other in my essence. Just being able to get a time up and get something that you're happy with and enjoy the game. I think is a big point. For running something that nobody else runs.
There's definitely people out there who find themselves motivated by world record. As someone who is not, I have in the past been, let's say, critical in the sense of not understanding it. And so there are people out there who are motivated by world record, and there can only be, one world record for a category. And so, if you jump into Super Mario 64, you're setting yourself up for failure if your main motivation is world record. Not to say that it can't be done, just saying that you're looking to throw your hat into a very large ring. But, for someone who is out there looking for a world record, sometimes an uncontested game feels like a easy route to that. But I think that just as many people are on the other side of the fence as saying, I enjoy playing games, I enjoy learning games. It's a lot less about where I end up on a leaderboard.
Yeah, it's a little bit more longevity for something that you had fun with.
Right.
Even if it's just a game that you run for a week or two and then say, I had fun with that, I've got a time, and then leave it behind. That's fun for me. That's what I enjoy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily a terrible thing, even if you are just going for the easy world record on occasion. I mean,
Yeah, go get it.
depends.
Yeah.
Eh,
You do you.
exactly.
We're back a dinosaur story. If you want a free world record, go for it.
Or anything on my speedrun.com profile.
Sure, there's plenty. I'm sure there's plenty to go around. So some challenges. I think one of the main, we know what our main topic that's going to take up a lot of the time is here, is routing stuff.
Yeah. So this sort of
Scratch.
flows smoothly into talking about the complications of routing, because I think a lot of people are not afraid to be the only runner of a game, but a lot of people are afraid of what that investment actually looks like. So if you're going to be the only runner for a game, you're setting yourself up for, okay, that means that I am probably the router and the glitch hunter and the, speedrunner. I'm all of those roles at once. And a lot of people tend to end up being very fortunate because the speedrunning community is incredibly diverse. So there are people who take passion in routing and take passion in glitch hunting without necessarily ever putting a run together. A lot of my games, I've been very fortunate to have the assistance of other people. Big Nose the Caveman on the first list there, if it hadn't been for Jeff XVX, diving into the code of the game to find all of these warps that just weren't known about before, I probably wouldn't have had a good shot at taking the world record at the time. Darkened Sky on there, Nick's report, pretty much single-handedly came up with every single route and every single glitch in every levels. So, I mean, it's not necessarily the fact that you're the only person who's doing it, but it is sort of a special challenge when you don't have someone behind you sort of pushing you forward necessarily. So I think that can be a big piece of it.
Yeah, having to be self-motivated for sure. If like how far are you going to push the game whenever it's you competing against your own time? That could be a challenge.
I mean, how do you decide how to push yourself forward? So you rank Geist, you've got pretty much no one else on that leaderboard,
Yeah,
right?
I
Are there
mean-
any other runners?
No, not really.
So how do you decide once it's good enough? Like, I know that you
It's
kind of...
not good enough, but I'm similar to Brosencho, I think, in that, and maybe you as well, where it's more about having a proof of concept almost for me of just like, here, I routed the game, I found the stuff, here's the best way I can figure out how to do it. I don't necessarily want to grind it all out myself to have the perfect run. I want to have a decent, pretty good run that's a proof of concept that's out there for anybody down the road who ends up picking the game. They'll have a starting point that they don't have to start from scratch, because not everybody likes to start from scratch. This, like, routing is a challenge when you're doing it from scratch, and I think in our cases, routing is the appeal as well. So for some people, that's the reason not to do it. They want to join a game that has a community and an established route, whereas that's like the bonus for us. Like we want to do the routing.
Yeah, there's so many people who just find it tedious and thankless.
Yeah, I do think that one place that I usually start, though, is just looking at Google or YouTube.
Just doing a little Google.
Athena, and then I look at pictures of Athena. She's pretty awesome.
And there's some real inspiration there.
Yeah.
No. Go to YouTube.
And then the route is done.
Yeah,
Just like that.
it's done. No, go to YouTube. Go look for videos, even if they're long plays. Task videos is a fantastic resource as well, because if there is a task of it, you're probably not going to be able to do everything in there, but it will often have strategies that will help you. Honestly, I usually go and watch how other people have done it in order to get ideas. And a lot of the times they'll run into weird glitches that, do nothing for them, but you'll see, wow, there might be something useful from that, I like to do a little bit of that video watching just to get a little research before jumping into a game.
I did that with Geist actually too, where I just looked YouTube search for Geist glitches, because people who aren't speedrunning still find glitches and post them, and that's a way you can often find stuff without having to discover it your own. Like there's so many random things you would never think to encounter or try to do.
That's essentially how the 64 floor glitch run of Final Fantasy IV got started, because it was a known glitch, but nobody had ever really put it into a speed run, as well as the miss skip. Nobody had ever put it into a speed run, so it was kind of fun to be able to go and route something that people hadn't done before, even though it was a game that everybody had done before. I was really the only 64 floor glitch runner at that time.
I think it's also important to say that as much as we're sort of saying, don't worry, you may not have to do all the routing work yourself. I mean, even if you find yourself doing a lot of routing, it's a skill that you can build up over time. So having routed one game lends itself to learning better how to route other games. And this goes for any of these skills. Learning to glitch hunt one game gives you some extra skills that you can use to glitch hunt another game. When I think about routing a game, I'm drawing on discoveries that I've found in other games and saying, well, how can I apply that same thought process to this game? Or, with glitches, if you have figured out a way to glitch in a 3D engine, there might be a chance that other 3D engines from that era might have similar types of glitches and at least give you a starting place to look for. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that even if you may find routing or glitch hunting somewhat tedious or frustrating at times, it is worth knowing that it gets easier. It's the sort of thing that once you've done it, I don't consider myself a particularly skilled router. I actually think that that's a weakness of mine, despite how much I like doing it. But it's something that I have noticed as I, over the years, I've gotten better at it. I'm at least less bad.
And we've all learned that you can just ask Nick's report to find everything for you. So if there's ever a glitch that you wish existed, you just find Nick's report, and especially at AGDQs, and hand him your game, and he'll just be at it until it works.
Get me a clip here.
Yeah. And he does it. It's just boom. Switch sound with the commercials.
Oh, sweet. I was thinking, before this panel, you and I were talking, well, all of us were talking a little bit about...
Mostly he was talking.
I'm
sorry. I'm just poking fun.
I just got thrown under the
No
bus.
hard feeling. I'm just poking fun. It was good.
But yeah, we were all talking about essentially where we start when we begin speedrunning something. And I know that we have very different strategies. Usually, I just like to play the game over and over and really get the feel of the game, get the feel of the mechanics. I want to know how I can move. I usually end up having tons of mistakes in my early runs. But I keep going because I want to get a feel for how I can recover from mistakes and essentially just figure out where to go. Whereas you tend to break it up quite a bit, don't you?
Yeah, I feel like you and I are like the opposite end of the spectrum. Like there's probably a happy medium in between that you and I have both seriously failed to find. But whereas you like to just run the game over and over, which has a lot of real strong advantages. I'm very much the sort of person who will break up the game into 15-second segments and will just practice that 15 seconds for the next 3 hours. And I will, and now the process of actually performing a run is an effort to string together what I believe to be the best version of every 15 seconds all in a row. Which, you know, there's strengths and there's drawbacks to both of those approaches, whereas in my way, I at least hopefully understand what's the best way to do everything at its core. I think one thing that you pointed out that I've definitely noticed in my own speedruns is you are much more resilient to mistakes. So if I were to take my method and use that for perhaps like a GDQ appearance, all it would take was one of those 15 seconds going just a little bit wrong, and now I just have to place the controller down. Like that's my choice. Whereas you have probably encountered a lot of those mistakes and know how to recover from them gracefully.
Yeah, I know with the Monkey King run, for example, even just sitting in the practice room earlier today, you know, I made tons of mistakes, but at least I had a pretty good idea of everything that I had to do in order to make up from that mistake. And so for me, that's been a big advantage. I think running it mostly just from beginning to end, ending up with terrible runs, but they're runs.
Right.
It's something.
You know you can complete every one of them. I mean, or at least famously in my life, I remember one instance where this came up was the Best of the Nest marathon, where me and Lack Attack raced Big Nose the Caveman.
Oh, yeah.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with Big Nose the Caveman, you know, once it was determined how to beat the game, because it has so little randomness, so little RNG in the game, I had optimized it to the point where I don't legitimately believe that there's more than a second to save in every single level. Like, that is probably one of my most optimized speed games I've ever done in my entire life. And the problem was that I was not really prepared for failure in any way. My response to every single mistake in the game is to hit the reset button. And so when I did my race against Lack Attack, I made one small mistake about halfway through the run, and I had no choice but to just let Lack finish. Like at that point, it just became a solo run because I didn't have another option. I was not prepared for failure in that way. And so it's good to sort of strike a balance. If you're going to be the only person running it, you should really know enough about the game to be able to handle anything. Because whereas in a game like Super Mario World, where there's a vast knowledge base, I know the backups because I've seen them from other people, but you have to invent those as well. You can't just focus on the best strat. You have to also figure out what's all of my options everywhere.
Yeah, so I suppose it depends on what goal you're going for. If you're going for the big, really solid run, that makes sense to break it up and do those segments. If you're going to be doing a marathon, for sure, make sure that you do plenty of runs where you make mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, not being perfect is perfect preparation.
And you end up finding new things that way too sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm also same page as Brossentia in, well, a similar page for maybe a slightly different reason, is that I just don't have the mental endurance to go grind out 15-second chunks repeatedly until I have it perfect. Like, I need to see a completed run at some point soon, or I'm not going to get bored before I finish. So
this may be a good point to mention.
The 12-hour challenge?
Yeah,
perhaps.
go for it.
All right, yeah, well, you may have heard of the 12-hour challenge. So that is by Golden, or started that, I believe, and periodically happens twice a year, perhaps.
Yeah, it's usually shortly after each GDQ.
Yeah, so it's a good incentive to learn a new speed game, and the gimmick of it is you limit yourself to 12 hours of learning and running, and you try to get the fastest time you can in 12 hours, and that can be pretty helpful because it can sort of stop you from being such a perfectionist that you just never finish. You will definitely have some sort of thing to show for it at the end of the 12 hours. And then you can always go back and improve it if you want afterwards. You can decide you hated the game and never touch it again, or you could, I mean, you can ditch it part way if you really hate the game. But
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, do you think that's a good tool then for picking up something that hasn't been done before?
I think so, especially since the goal isn't to be perfect there.
Right.
The goal isn't to get world record at the end of it. The goal is to learn a run and get at least a route done. You know, so that if you jump back to the game later, you can at least muddle your way through it again. So,
Right.
yeah, I think with the idea of running something that you've never run before, it's great to at least be thinking about how to get through that game. I think I did Kid Cool for one of the 12-hour challenges.
Might have. I know that
A couple of mine were.
It was a mistake, but I did it.
Yeah, Kid Cool in general is a mistake.
Yeah.
I think it's a great format. It's certainly been very helpful for me in learning some games. I have a tendency to accidentally pick really ambitious games for them, so I'll spend about 10 hours learning the game, and then I've just got the bare minimum time to put something together real quick.
That's happened to me too. Yeah.
But I think in general it's a really great format because it keeps you out of the weeds as much as possible. I can't get away with just practicing a 15-second segment for 3 hours. You actually have to just start stringing things together and see how it works. And if you're going to use that, I mean, while the community event that happens is very popular and a lot of fun for the reason that it is a big community event, the entire community is doing it at the same time, and I think that's always been my big motivation to participate in it because I really love that it seems like the entire community comes out of the woodwork to do exactly what I love doing, which is learning new games. But I think that if you're going to do it on your own, which I think that people should, I think that it's a great format for learning a game if you're not just looking to, quickly grind out a world record. If you're actually just trying to learn a game the proper way, I think that's a great way to start. I think if you're going to pick a shorter game, some 10-minute NES game, then you probably don't need 12 hours. It's probably sufficient to make it the 5-hour challenge. If you're going to pick a Final Fantasy game, make it the 60-hour challenge. But I think in general, it can be very helpful to pick a format like that that does not permit you to get into the weeds.
Cool. Were any of your games for GDQ 12-hour challenge games or no? Because I'm pretty sure King of Kings was for me, but it's been a while at this point.
I don't think so. I know we had quite a few for Big Bad Game-a-thon when we did that.
Shout out to Big Bad
12-hour
Game-a-thon.
challenges. Actually, anybody here, did you do anything for the 12-hour challenge that you submitted to GDQ?
No. Oh, well.
Wow, nobody.
We need
okay,
more.
Well,
We need more 12-hour challenges.
people
Apparently.
in the camera, I know you're watching me. Okay, do the 12-hour challenge,
You
and
poor
then
people.
submit to GDQ. Okay.
Submit.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of worth talking a little bit about what is it like actually being the only runner on a leaderboard? Because so we talked a little bit about what are our motivations, but what keeps you? So like for you, when you have a game like Monkey King, when you have a game like Kid Cool, when you worked on it, when you had Bible Adventures, what was pushing you forward at the time?
I think with Monkey King, the biggest thing was that I just enjoyed the game, and
Really?
Yes, yes. Okay, I'm going to defend this game
don't have to
so much during my run, okay? I just want you to know.
You don't have to
but
defend things to me.
It was genuinely enjoyable, and I thought if I can pull together a run, then at the very least we can get something that people can look at later and enjoy. And then somebody came and beat my time by 5 minutes or so, and I got really angry, so I went and beat them again. But yeah,
Despite world records still count as world records.
oh yeah. So the thing is, like with a lot of these games, you know, once I manage to get something up there, I know somebody is going to look at it and somebody is going to think about beating it. And I think that is a big motivation, because somebody else can take something that I loved and, you know, put their own love into it.
Yeah, I think that's something that we talked about earlier, was this idea that when you have a run on the leaderboard, there's sort of two mentalities, and it doesn't have to be person to person, it can even be game to game, where either someone else coming along makes you either motivated to defend the run, so maybe that is a motivator on its own, someone, you know, joining your little one-person community now motivates you to put more effort into it, or either that, or it feels really good to have been someone's benchmark, to have set a time that you're pretty proud of. You know that it at least represents what you knew about the game, and to see someone surpass it, whether they looked at the game or not, or whether they looked at your run and drew from that knowledge or not, just knowing that there was further to go can sometimes be rewarding in its own right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Tintin games. Like, no, my times have been beaten in those. But nobody was running them before. Nobody was touching them. So it was very, I don't know, very, very happy for me to see them beat those.
Yeah, I was the Bubsy Guy for a little while.
Oh, yeah.
For Bubsy 3D, and in both the any % category and 100% category, people later came along. Pete came along and completely trounced my any % world record and brought a lot of new ideas to it, which in that case, for that game, I don't think it was because I was the Bubsy Guy, but because I really did care a lot about that game. Having new knowledge that I just never considered just show up to that game was a huge motivator for me to come back. Not necessarily because I had some specific desire to pull the world record back, but because it's like there's more to be done. I had stopped running this game because I thought there are no more pages to turn in this book, and suddenly there was another chapter, so it was really nice.
Yeah, I've definitely had that experience with Geist too. It's usually I come back to it, I just come back to it for fun, but then every time I come back to it, I find something new that opens it up and makes me want to keep running it further, even though I'm only competing against myself and I'm not necessarily going for the perfect run. I want to have a run that well represents everything that we know about it, and just keep finding new things. And I actually encountered somebody towards the end of last year who I think it might be their first speed game now, but they're picking up King of Kings the early years for NES. Yeah, and they don't speak super good English, so I've sort of been helping them like set up their stream, join online marathons, and like do commentary for them and all that. And it's just because I did this game that nobody else had done before, and now it turns out they wanted to do it too, and so there they are doing it, and it's their, I believe, first speed run as well. So you never know what random game out there is going to help motivate somebody else to start their speedrunning career.
For sure.
Yeah. What else do we have to talk about here? I mean,
viewership.
Yeah. There's a challenge, perhaps. Well, you guys are different, though.
Yeah, we talked about this
weird.
before, how me and Brosentia actually don't experience the normal experience people. So it's really sad, because I think a lot of people probably desire to learn new speed games, but I think the thing that holds a lot of people back is that viewership does tend to be affected. There are people who are going to be there for you, and there's people who are going to be there for the game that you're playing. And so the people who are there for you are going to stick around, but when you change games, the people who are there just for the game may not. And Brosentia and I have been very fortunate over our, Twitch careers to have amassed quite a following of people who are there for us, and it's probably due to the fact that we do play so many games. I mean, with your Cuso Grande tournament, it's not the same thing every time on your stream, right?
No, I think that people would be angry if they always came and saw the same game over and over. Honestly, viewership drops when I have the same game, but it's just because of the community that we created. People are there to expect something new, and honestly, if you switch to a new game, the people who are going to stick with you are the people who care about you. Honestly, I think it's a good community. It's a good way to tell who is going to make a solid part of your community.
Yeah, it's kind of like an interesting litmus test for. I mean, I don't want to promote the belief that the only people who should be allowed to watch my stream are the people who are there for me.
Oh, no.
Like, if you like Super Mario World and I'm playing Super Mario World, get out. Like, how dare you?
I'll kick you.
But that being said, it is kind of nice that when you find yourself switching games relatively often, that the core group that you get tends to be focused differently. They're there for your best interests, maybe. They're not just there because you happen to be the current, contender for world record, and they're going to leave as soon as someone better comes along. It's just, it's nice to have that community that can support you through that. But that also doesn't tend to be the average experience, I don't think. And that's, I think, something that holds people back.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, probably if you're not going for partnership or for huge Twitch growth, and you're just doing for fun, which is probably good motivation in general. I mean, if it's not your job, I can understand if it's your job to stream on Twitch, then you're probably going to want to care about your viewership a lot more as well. But I don't know. I just do whatever also. And if people come, they come. If they don't, they don't. And I've had new viewers trickle in that I might get more viewers doing something else, but I still end up meeting new people that trickle in from weird games that who knew somebody was a fan of Geist as a kid. And it's like, wow, people played this. Okay, that's cool, I guess. And then they'll come in, and even if you are the only runner of the game, it's often the case that your viewers and other people will be contributing ideas, which we talked about this earlier as well. But even if you're the only runner, it's not necessarily that you're alone, because lots of people will be suggesting things as you play, as you route on stream. They'll say, why don't you try this? Or what if you did this at this time? Maybe if you die and push this button at the same frame, it'll wrong warp to the credits. And then it doesn't actually, but it's close and it's helpful. So that could be a fun thing too. And I've also joined communities too, where it's a small speedrun community, and I don't necessarily want to run the game myself, but I'll put in the effort to actually glitch hunt because I care enough to do that.
For sure. I think I've had a lot of good experiences trying to route or otherwise investigate a game on stream, and having people in my stream contribute ideas. And not all ideas are equal, but there's usually some meat on that bone. So
I'm gonna say, if you are routing on stream, you can probably expect viewership to go even lower.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest there.
Yeah,
True.
And honestly, for me, a lot of the times I like to route offline, especially when it's practicing that one trick over and over again. Unlike you, Author Blues, who you don't care.
I just turn on my stream whenever I'm bored.
Yeah. But if it's going to be boring for me, I assume it's going to be boring for people watching. So usually I'll turn off the stream unless I think it's going to be comedic in some way. So that's one thing. If you are worried about routing on stream, it can be something to consider. Just having some of the main runs or some of the biggest practice sessions, full run practice sessions, often tend to be a little bit more entertaining for people, and they can still give some of the feedback.
Yeah, for sure.
I think in the interest of time, we're probably pretty close to Q&A.
Good. Well, then, we already sort of talked about this, but whenever perhaps you're the only one, new people come along, and I think in general we're saying we're pretty happy when new people pick up a game that we were the runner of and even beat our time and find something new and makes us want to come back, or it's cool to see them take what we did and run with it.
I'm rarely thrilled to lose a world record, but it's sometimes nice because either I no longer have to labor under that burden anymore, or it motivates me to go forward with it. So either way, I think it's a win anytime someone joins your community. And even people who don't necessarily beat your time, for instance, I run Violist of Hamlin, which is an obscure SNES game.
I love that game.
Me too. But someone else recently came along and started running that game and got a time pretty close to my time. But he'd also contributed a lot of really interesting ideas to the run. His time wasn't as good as mine, but he had a lot of really clever ideas. And so I think any time you get a second set of eyes on it, whether it be someone who is putting up attempts, or whether or not it's a glitch hunter or a router or someone who's just playing I've discovered so much stuff from Let's Plays. I will watch someone play a game that I've speedrun before just because I'm interested in the game and see, oh, how did I never just walk that direction? That's way shorter.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is one of my biggest things with playing games casually, especially on Twitch, because it's so easy to comment to people, is unless the streamer actually wants spoilers or any hints of any kind, oh man, I cannot stand it when people give hints or spoilers, because I just love to see what people do when left to their own devices. They come up with the weirdest ways to beat things, and that ends up being new speed strats half the time, or or just hilarious. But yeah, like that's one of the most entertaining things for me is watching other people do it, especially when I think I know the best possible way, and then they come up with something I never even knew was possible.
Yeah, and I think that the thing is, even if somebody new comes to your game, odds are they're going to be trying things that you tried before. One of the things that really rubbed me wrong when I was learning a new game somebody else had learned is whenever they told me, we tried that, it doesn't work. I hate that phrase because it makes me not want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, instead being like, you know, have you found anything useful for that? Get excited, get invested in what they're doing, you know, be positive about them trying things, because even though you've tried something maybe 500 times, we know with video games, sometimes it takes
I've been proven wrong so many times that I've stopped saying, you know, we've tried that, it doesn't work, and I now say we've tried that and we haven't found anything with it yet, because that's way more accurate. I no longer say anything is impossible. We found barrier skip.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So, like, nothing is impossible.
Yep.
It's just a matter of who's willing to put in the time. I know that when I'm doing glitch hunting, I will walk up to a corner in a 3D game and I will try to roll through it for 3 minutes. I've watched streams of Nick's Report rolling into the same corner for 5 hours.
I know, and then he does it.
And he will get through, okay? I'm just, for perspective, it's all about investment. Things are out there. It's important to remember that more eyes is always a good thing.
I mean, that's sort
like
of is
the
what
X-Files.
happened when I was doing sketch glitch for Final Fantasy VI. It was just trying to figure out a way, because somebody told me it could possibly be done and then didn't actually tell me anything about it. They're like, oh, I won't talk about it. So I just went and for hours and hours tried literally everything I could think of, and finally found a way to skip from the world of balance to the world of ruin. And
that's something
What
you
have
want
you
to
done?
do.
So that's a positive.
And then I'm like, somebody else can run it. I don't want to do this.
And then someone will.
Yeah, oh, they did. But yeah, that's something. Never say that something can't be done, you know? And if you have tried something, maybe you can even suggest other things that, you know, you tried a little bit that you think might work, you know? Just encourage growth is what I'd say.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then, with that, shall we open it up to some questions, if anybody has questions?
Yeah, we've probably got about 20 minutes, so...
We have all night, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
as
we've
long
got
as-
5 hours,
I think-
so...
So
We'd
the
like
mic's
to-
over there. If you would like to ask any questions from the expert panel, feel free. Don't everyone jump up at once, all right? You gotta
like to join the
You gotta
expert
show
panel.
a little bit of patience, a little bit of temperance.
You're the
Okay,
expert.
works. So, in the age of websites like SRC, SDA, and YouTube, if you look and see a game has none of those medias, versus looking and see, oh, someone has run this on YouTube, or someone has run this on SDA, or it has a speed run, but there's no runs up. Do you approach games like that differently, or does seeing it has nothing versus seeing it has something lead you to see it the same way either?
So that's a...
Question. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. That's actually a
Okay.
really interesting question, because I feel like a lot of people have the second approach you mentioned. A lot of people very much, when they come across a game that they want to figure things out in, they will intentionally avoid looking into anything. You don't want to have your mind polluted with already one way of thinking. You want to come at it with your own unique approach. For me particularly, I don't consider myself much of a glitch hunter, so I am willing to consume all of the material that is available first, and then I will start working on it myself, usually with a second eye of routing. So when I see a level and I know what the strat already was, I will try something new. I'll just say, I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to see what happens if I go this way and this way. But I find that the people who have the patience and the tolerance to not seek out information in advance and are willing to be patient and say, I'm going to just bring in completely fresh eyes to this, often produce some of the most interesting results. And so this is a shortcoming of mine that I sort of like to have a knowledge base to work from, but I know that if I were to not do that, I might produce better results. How about you guys?
Yeah, I think honestly the first step of speedrunning for me is to do research. And if information exists, I'm gonna find out what exists. Odds are, one video is not going to have everything that you want. And watching multiple videos to see things that people have done, I feel for a game that has been run before is something that I want to do. I want to make sure that I know the history and different ways that people have approached a speedrun. If nobody's speedrun it before, I'll go watch long plays if any exist. I'll just muddle through at my own, through a game. I know that a few of us are going to work on routing super highlight in the near future for Genesis. I'm sorry, but
God, you
it
are
has
spare
to be
parts.
done. But there are like no runs anywhere. There's a task, and so I'm gonna watch the task to see what they have done. But other than that, it'll be figuring out how to translate it to a real life run, and mostly just making mistakes and dying a whole bunch in order to figure out the best way to get through.
Yeah. I kind of ideally would also go with what you were saying that you don't usually do with the going completely open-minded with no tampering of my ideas with seeing something before. But on the other hand, that's really time-consuming. I hardly have enough time to learn new runs as it is, so probably I wouldn't do that anymore. If I had the time for it, I would, but
It's a slow process.
it's a slow process to do
yeah.
it from scratch. So yeah, if there is other material that's out there, I'll be looking it up, and I also just look it up to see does it even look like it's going to be a fun game. If anybody tried it, even if it's a partial run, like does this look like a fun speed game that I want to invest the time in? Because sometimes it seems like it's going to be fun, and then once I start cracking into it, it's like, oh, this is actually a real pain.
This is the worst.
Yeah.
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 Thank you for the question.
That actually leads really well into my question, which was, do you have any examples of kind of like games that you decided you wanted to start routing, and then once you got into it, you realized maybe there's too much RNG, or maybe it's not necessarily that it's impossible, but it's probably not worth getting into?
Do you want a list?
So
or-
Bug 2 for Sega
examples
Saturn.
of speedrun regret that you started routing and then decided nope.
Bug 2 for Sega Saturn. I wanted to run a Saturn game that was something, and I started, but it's so long and it's so hard, and cutscenes and loading screens. It's the loading screens, really. I just don't want to deal with the loading screens. That was enough. I quit. I don't want loading.
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily want to throw any examples under the bus, but I've definitely had my fair share of games where they looked really fascinating, especially because often my first point of research for games that don't have a ton of information about them is a task. And tasks just have the natural side effect of being designed for entertainment. Task videos, the way they categorize videos, makes much more visible tasks that have been designed to be entertaining. So just naturally, tasks tend to be very entertaining to watch. And it's often the case that you will go ahead and sit down to try to reproduce something like that, or work out a way to speedrun it alternative to that, and you discover that it's really just not good.
I'd say I have a example of a game that I still speedrun and I never should have, which is Athena. And it's because it was part of the bad video game exchange that PJ started. Yes, everything is PJ's fault. He breaks everyone, everything, everyone, people's souls. Anyways, it was such an incredibly difficult game to even just play casually. Doing a speedrun of it, I did sessions of 6 hours just trying to plow through this game that I absolutely hated, and eventually got a run that I was okay with. But if it was something that wasn't part of the bad game exchange, I'm looking at you, Dragonheart. It's 50% PJ's fault, 50% yours. Okay. What?
So he hated the game, and now he's come to tolerate it.
Yeah, and then everybody's like, you have to play Athena now, and I'm like, I don't want to play it anymore.
Just ask Dragon.
People made me play it.
Just ask Dragon Dark when he's going to play Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, Wizard of Oz.
I still have your card.
You still haven't done a speed run of it. Okay, anyway, sorry. We're distracting. The thing is, it was still rewarding in some degree to be able to get through it, but honestly, if it were my choice, I would have dropped it. Honestly, it was so incredibly infuriating, that game to get through, that honestly, I don't recommend that anybody speedrun Athena. Just don't. It's a mistake.
And I think to wrap this up and make it relevant to the conversation, I think it's important to understand that when you pick a game that's maybe uncontested or that you've never run before and you're starting to learn it, don't be afraid to say this just isn't fun. Don't get locked into this fallacy of because you've invested some time into it that you're now, you owe it something. Don't be afraid to, it's a hobby that we do for fun. If you're not enjoying a game after the first 30 minutes, probably not going to get better after 6 hours, so.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right,
Life
thanks.
is short. Do something fun. Do something good.
Thanks a lot.
Do something you
Thank you for the question.
And take a nap afterwards.
Hey, thanks for the panel. You talked a little bit about motivation for continuing to run, but after you have a route, and you might be the only person running it, how long, and this might vary for each of you, but how long do you spend perfecting that? How long do you run against yourself? And additionally, do you ever try and spice it up and say, well, maybe I'll just make another category?
Sure. Oh yeah, for sure. People love creating new categories when they feel like they just haven't gotten enough out of a game. So to answer your first question, I think there's an interesting trade-off between people who will purely optimize a route and when do you sort of go back and say, all right, I need to take these fresh eyes and see if I can discover a new route. But I mean, that happens so often once you've sort of optimized and perfected, and maybe you just need a second pass. That fresh set of eyes you've been waiting for to bring life to your speed game are probably your own. You have a fresh perspective at that point. I mean, I've routed a game apropos of nothing, starting completely from scratch. I maybe played through it blind, and then I said, I'm just going to route it. I don't have nearly the perspective I have after 3 weeks or a month or 2 months of running it. At that point now, I'm a brand new person, and I can bring a new perspective to it. So I think that also is an important detail, is that you don't have to just run it into the ground and tire yourself of it. You can sort of go back to the drawing board and make it interesting again.
Yeah, I think for me, I speedrun until it's not fun. And if I'm not enjoying it, I don't want to put work into it. Honestly, taking a break when you're not enjoying it can often give you a little time so that, after a while, you can start thinking about it and thinking about things that you didn't think about before. That extra time, honestly, is sometimes exciting enough to get you back into it. So that's me, especially since I have the opportunity to jump into so many different games. If I'm not having fun with it, I'll move on and come back at a different time when I can enjoy it again.
Yeah, I honestly nothing to add. That's exactly how I do it. If it's not fun,
Good Lord had intended me to speedrun only one game, he wouldn't have made so many others.
right? I guess.
Hello, thanks for running the panel. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Wow.
To be honest, while I was waiting, I forgot my question, but I thought of 2 other ones.
Great.
In the meantime, but they're not as good, so here goes. So what happens, let's say you have a game that it's already had a couple of people try to develop a run for it, and they decide it's just not really that great of a game, and you start playing it, and you like it, and you think it's good, but there's really good reasons those people didn't want to keep doing it, and they're the sort of things that would probably prevent most people from doing it. Is that the sort of game where you would try to grow a community around that? And
I never do any speedrunning with the intention of growing a community.
It just happens.
And everyone has different tastes. I mean, they make pistachio ice cream despite my insistence that I will not eat it.
And I had a good example that relates to you because I was looking into spiritual warfare.
Oh, good Lord.
Which it was cool. I thought it was a decent game. It
is a decent
I was
game.
impressed. I was like, this is a decent game.
Cannot
I'm
believe
gonna run
Wonder
this.
Tree managed to make one video game.
I know, and then I was like, hey, Author
Wisdom
Blues,
Tree.
I'm thinking of running Spiritual Warfare. And he's like, let me tell you why I tried to run Spiritual Warfare and didn't several times. And I was like, those are good reasons I'm not going to run Spiritual Warfare.
Yeah, you shouldn't have listened to me. You should try it yourself.
I don't
but
know.
I will.
I
I
don't
will
wanna-
never hesitate to complain about something. Please, no.
No, we know.
Have you read my Twitter?
So, I mean, yeah, I think you could look at that and see if those are reasons that are right for you. That could be a thing with game reviews in general, too. Like, opinions. Is their opinion based on a reason that is something that would bother you as well? Like, you know, is RNG something that matters to you in a speed run? It might matter. It might turn somebody off. It might not be a big deal for you. So that's something.
I guess
Yeah,
I could. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I think that the biggest thing that jumps out to me at a time that happened was with Kid Cool, which I started. Well, you know, I thought if somebody played this really well, it's going to be such an awesome marathon run to watch. It'll be such an awesome speed game. So I started playing it, and it's literally the worst game ever. It's seriously, it's incredibly difficult, and I didn't have the patience to route it.
It's really good.
So I got a crappy time up on a leaderboard, and I'm like, I am done with this. And then Author Blues and Smartball were dumb and decided to play it too, and they got.
No, I
much
stand by
better
that,
times.
but it's also real good. So
I watched it. It looked pretty fun.
Yeah, and it's very impressive to watch, but I'm really glad somebody else was able to take it from there. I don't want to play it more. I will, but I don't want to.
I guess another a way to rephrase the question, I guess, is
Sure.
how do I get other people to play Arcana for Super Nintendo and talk to me about it?
yeah,
Post it on Reddit.
That one's not happening. Oh yeah, post negative comments about it on Reddit and
Yeah.
see if other people will defend it.
Oh yeah, they'll love it. Yeah.
You're a genius.
Yeah. I get that a lot.
Don't forget Stumble Upon and Dig.
Hey everyone, so I was curious if there was a certain genre of video game that lent itself better than other genres, because, for example, a JRPG, you're going to have a lot more time investment into it, and if you're investing it into something that ends up being bunk, then you have the sunken cost fallacy, versus you could go with a 10-minute NES RPG like you were saying, but also there's a lot less opportunity to find things in a shorter game, and you're going to abandon it sooner. If it won't
I
work better.
think that's actually a really interesting point. So first off, when it comes to genre, the answer for every speedrunning question that's ever been asked since time immemorial is do what you enjoy. So how do you pick your favorite speed game? Play whatever you like. How do you pick a genre to invest into? Play the ones that you like. But you do bring up something very interesting, and that's, you know, the enjoyment that you get out of the routing process for something that's so long versus something that's so short. You know, people love JRPGs, and I think what really makes those a lot of fun is that they present a wide breadth of routing options and choices to be made. And for people who are very much into sort of the process of optimization and evaluation, those games are just a playground to run with. Whereas a 10-minute platformer, for instance, tends to have a lot fewer vectors of attack, if you will. But what I will say is that the flip side to that, because that doesn't paint platformers in a very good light, is that when you find a skip, when you find something that skips 60 seconds in a JRPG, that's like, cool, you figured out how to skip a text box. But when you find something that cuts out a minute in a 10-minute NES speedrun, that's a wrong warp. And everyone gets hype about that. So I think there's a lot of trade-offs. I think it's, first off, never make your decisions based on, you know, what's going to produce the most excitement or something like that. But I think they both have a lot of real positives to them, especially if you're attuned to that genre.
Yeah, I'm also going to say, in addition to that, if you care about viewership, first, go off of what you love. But if you love everything, play a platformer. Because it's going to be a lot easier for people to understand if they just jump into your stream for the first time. Honestly, I know that it's a lot. I don't know. We do this a lot with with Kusagrande, the blind video game tournament with bad video games, and it's a lot easier for people to see how you're doing with a platformer rather than a JRPG. At the same time, you got to do what you love. If you're not enjoying it, then it's dumb. Then don't do it. You know, you only have so much time with your life. Do something that makes you happy.
So don't play Dark and Sky only because there's Skittles in it.
Yeah,
Well, dude,
Especially because there's Skittles in it.
But actually, that made me think of something though. Is with platformers, what makes one platformer more interesting than another? And I think it kind of holds true for games in general for speedrunning. In my opinion, anyway, is that if it has a variety of gameplay mechanics, interesting things to work with, the more tools you have at your disposal for gameplay, the more interesting options you're going to have with routing and speedrunning. And generally, that's just kind of be how it works. If there's like just move right and jump, and there's not even a run button, and there's no like momentum or every little additional thing that the game adds to it is going to add a new level of depth, and that can really make a game a lot more fun than it would otherwise be.
Unlike Barbie for the Game Boy Assault game.
Yeah,
Barbie NES, okay? It's the superior one. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the question.
If anyone's looking for a platformer, I know a 2.5D platformer that eats your jump inputs.
Okay.
That's fun.
That's every platform.
What is it?
It's called Pandemonium for
Oh,
the
God.
PlayStation 1, Saturn, and
I've heard of
PC. Anyway,
I'm good.
so do the things we talked about here today, would they theoretically transfer over to a game that maybe you're like the second runner for, but you're in a way resurrecting the game? Like the last run was a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, and you're essentially bringing it back to life. You're looking at a very old run, and you'd be essentially starting new, but you'd have an actual run as a foundation. Would these things transfer to that, or would you have to approach that with an almost completely different mindset because someone's already done it?
We talked about this earlier. We talked about it with Bible Adventures. Brossentia had previously had a unbeatable world record in Baby Moses.
Yeah.
By all rights, looking at his record, there should be no way to beat his time. And in fact, other people had tried to contest it, and I think the best that had been done was just tying the time.
Yeah.
Because it was, again, by all rights, a perfect run. And I had only decided to run the game because I had discovered this very small detail where I could save like 1/10 of a second. And so I saw a vector of attack and decided to go for it. But we were talking about this earlier because we were talking about how this actually still sort of satisfies the point of this discussion because it was uncontested. When he went for the record, there was no one he was fighting with. He pushed it to the absolute limits. He talks about how he's not interested in pushing it. He has done this, okay?
But it was like 1 minute. Okay, it's a 1 minute speed run.
Okay,
Everybody should learn it.
optimizing a 1 minute speed run is a different type of hell than anything else.
Well,
so,
yes.
But that being said, when he ran it, he was pretty much alone. And when I ran it, it was 3 years after he had run it. So there was no community. So I was essentially resurrecting it. And I will say, yes, it is definitely an advantage to be able to base it off of something. I had a huge leg up over Brossentia because I could just take the things he had discovered and add my one little piece in there. You often hear about someone broke some record that had gone uncontested for 5 years, and they say, oh yeah, by the way, we had found a 30-second skip, so that's why we beat it. And so it's not that it's unimportant, but it's a different type of thing. And so in my case, it was uncontested in the sense that I was practically running a different speed game. I had something up on him that he could not 3 years ago compete with me on. And so it's kind of interesting being able to leverage that extra information.
I should go tie you in that.
Go for it.
Okay.
There's a lot of week left. You can do it this week.
Oh, okay. Maybe.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for the question.
So if you guys had to pick one game, be it a game that you've received help on, not received no help on, maybe never even finished the run, what would you say is your favorite, most satisfying, rewarding game that had no previous runs that you attempted or finished out of all the games that you've attempted running?
For me, honestly, I always am going back to Geist, but it's not even that it's a great speed game. Don't remember that, though, whenever I submit it again next GDQ. But it's just that since I worked on it from scratch, that the experience of finding new things just constantly scattered throughout the years of, oh, here's another new thing that totally breaks this level open. I get to route it again. And what's the fastest path I can take using this knowledge? Like, that's what really made it fun for me, not even the speed run itself, but the routing experience. And so that that feeling of discovery of glitch hunting and routing with Geist for me was definitely one of the highlights of speedrunning for me.
Honestly, I think the one that was the most rewarding for me was Wolf Quest, which sounds weird because it's the most chill video game I think I've ever run. But when I found out that you could drown your puppies and save time, it became...
That's
It's just so funny. It's so good.
That description doesn't even scratch the surface of the landscape that is Wolf Quest.
No, I love Wolf Quest. It's seriously.
What happens when you hit the P button on the keyboard?
You pee. You push P to P. But the thing is, it gave me a chance to explore this game that nobody had thought of speedrunning. You know, it's just a wolf game where you run around and do wolf things. And but you know, being able to put some route to it, you know, add things that were funny that still made it fast, that was really satisfying to me. And also the fact that every time I play it, it's super chill and everybody can just sit back and chat and have a good time. That's what I love about it.
So I could probably pick a number of different games, and none of them were ones that I worked on alone. You know, you and Nick's report had helped with Bubsy 3D. Any percent you had brought a lot to that game. Nick's report with Darkened Sky, Jeff XVX on Big Nose the Caveman. All games that I feel like the end result was an incredible accomplishment, and I only saw further by standing on the shoulders of giants. But I think the one that I'm going to say specifically is one thing that I'm very proud of myself on is because I've often, if not required, made use of the help of others. One that I'm very proud of is a game called Super Widget for the Super Nintendo, where even though it's a platformer, it has this weird experience system that I had discovered in the process of speedrunning it, actually allowed you to skip a lot of content, which made for a significant skip in the game if you were incredibly precise and incredibly skilled at it. And the routing process for that is probably the game that I'm most proud of routing. It was, I have a spreadsheet this big with numbers all throughout the game trying to figure out the optimal way to play it, and I had done it with a little bit of help, but for the most part I had put a lot of work into it, and it's one that I'm still proud of to this day, even though I'm currently working on improving the time because the run is bad but the routing is cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It looks like we have no other questions.
All right.
You know what that means.
We're done.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope the rest of your GDQ is fantastic. And yeah, feel free to come chat with any of us. And if you ever have a game that you're thinking about, you know, feel free to chat with others, see what they think about it. Feel free to do runs that nobody's done before.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, guys.